Welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies.
Yes. We have just seen Luca Guadagnino's Call Me By Your Name.
Guadagnino.
I've seen it for the second time. Mike's seen it for the first. The story is about a young boy whose parents are academics. They have this wonderful big house in the countryside surrounded by orchards and so on. Oliver, played by Armie Hammer, comes to visit as a graduate student for 6 weeks, and Elio, played by Timothée Chalamet, falls madly in love with him and kind of out of control, really. Then as the summer ends, the affair ends, and at the end of it, Oliver calls to announce his engagement to a woman. That's the story.
Set in the 1980s.
Set in 1983, very importantly. Because, 1983, a friend was saying on Facebook that 1983 is the last year where you can, legitimately ignore the AIDS crisis. Yeah, that's kind of, after that, everyone knew.
Right. And set in Italy, I don't know if you said that.
That's right, it's set in the north of Italy. So I'm very curious to know what you thought, because my impression is when the film came out, almost everyone I talked to just absolutely loved it. And now there seems to be a real backlash against it. So I'm curious to know your thoughts.
What's the backlash?
Why don't you tell me what you think first, and then I'll tell you the backlash. Cause
well, it didn't. It's not my cup of tea. But I think films like this just aren't my cup of tea. I don't think it's the film's fault.
What about this isn't your cup of tea?
These films about young love, people discovering themselves in their youth. Honestly, for a lot of the film, the main emotion I felt was fury.
Well, explain it to me, because that is
because I wasn't having this good a time when I was 17 years old. I wasn't having sex with women. I wasn't having sex with men. I wasn't even having sex with fruit. Nothing goes wrong for these guys.
Mm. Maybe
they
that's
have nothing to complain about. I want things to go. And you've got Michael Stuhlbarg, who plays the father, is unbelievably progressive and forward-thinking.
I wish my father had been like that.
I know, right?
I find it so moving.
I think his sort of monologue to Timothée Chalamet's character at the end is beautiful.
I think it's beautiful.
I couldn't. This is me, right? This is just me. I couldn't buy a lot of it. This just wasn't my experience as a kid, and that doesn't mean that it's not realistic or anything. It's just, but it made me angry to see other people having such a good time.
That maybe is part of the reason for the backlash.
Possibly. I mean, I can certainly understand people would want to see this film is basically this kind of unbridled sort of love and happiness between these two characters. It grows, it's not there right at the start, but it grows and it grows. And ultimately, nothing really goes wrong for him. The only thing that goes wrong is he has to leave, and then ultimately that means they don't see each other again, and their lives move on. And Oliver gets engaged. But I can see why people would go, well, surely there should be some repercussions to this, or something going wrong, or their life should have some happiness. People should take against them, or whatever it is. But nothing like that happens, and actually it's quite beautiful. But just my personal response was that I couldn't take it. I don't need people to have a bad time.
Right. Well,
and I'm not even making that up. I really properly was feeling angry when they were having a good time.
Well, you see, I loved it all.
I'm not saying that for effect.
I know. Well, I know, kind of. You kept saying things like, he's too old to snuggle up to his parents like that.
Well, that's true. I was being kind of snarky, but that's absolutely true, right? So this kid's 17 years old. He's lying there with his head on his dad's lap, and his mum's reading him romantic novels. This is ridiculous.
Yes.
Who has this relationship with their parents?
Well, who cares?
I care.
I loved it, and I mean, to be honest, I think seeing it a second time made me think it's not really a good film. You know, it made me see some faults, you know, that I hadn't seen before. I hate the way that the camera constantly turns to nature all the time. And sometimes you understand very clearly why, and sometimes it just seems nonsensical, like, you know, a lack of imagination.
It's building a mood.
Yeah.
But, it's not really doing much more than that.
There were certain scenes that I disliked. So, the scene where, you know, they've had sex and, you know, they go walking into town and they meet up with these strangers and he dances once again, you know, to the psychedelic First song. I thought that was just kind of really badly staged, right? I found more fault in Armie Hammer's performance now. I think, you know, he's obviously meant to be this Aryan, you know, American, you know, god or something, like at the beginning. So, and I understand that he has to be like more handsome and that everybody finds attractive.
Well, there's that scene particularly where because he's like an archaeologist or something like that, and he and Michael Stuhlbarg's character are looking at slides of these statues of Adonis figures, and the words that Michael Stuhlbarg is using to describe them are totally applicable to Armie Hammer, like they're describing him.
That's right, except, you know, there's a shift in the film where he should have been as emotionally transparent as the Timothée Chalamet character. The moment where, you know, they both realize that they're attracted to each other and that they're in love with each other, you know, all of a sudden he should have stopped being like the statue and actually become a feeling person. And I don't think Armie Hammer is a transparent actor. I think he's very reticent. He's always holding something back.
He's quite mannered in a way.
Yes. So I thought that was a problem that I initially hadn't, you know, I hadn't noticed really. But still, I love it. I think part of the problems that people have are, A, the class of people that it deals with. So on the one hand, you know, these people are too rich and they're too cultured and they're too understanding and they speak too many languages. I love that, right? And I think kind of, you know, we live in a time where the only thing that seems to be important is money. And actually kind of, you know, the defense of these values of culture, you know, seems to me like more important than ever. And I love that the film is serious about art and culture. So, you know, that's not a problem to me at all. The fact that, you know, these people are wealthy is actually not a problem to me at all either. You know, kind of, it seems to me interesting when we find people in movies being rich a problem, you know, and when we don't, and why it's singled out at this moment. I mean, you know, kind of, you know, so many American movies are always aspirational. They're always about people who live in better flats and wear better clothes and have more money than we do. That's never seen as a problem except, you know, kind of seemingly raised now.
Yeah, so, when it's people who are kind of intellectually elite as well as wealthy and just kind of relaxing and enjoying their lives and taking things at a slow pace and just not living like you do.
Yes, and
actually, you're like, well, this is wrong.
Yeah. So, you know, and actually you don't get the sense that these people are super wealthy anyway, right? Kind of, it's said that she inherited this house from her parents and he's a university lecturer. So obviously, you know, people with money, but not like, you know, not Wall Street.
But yeah. Nonetheless, she's inherited a big house in the north of Italy.
That's right. You know,
they're comfortable for sure.
For sure. But again, you know, I don't mind that. The other thing that people had problems with, which I find interesting, was the way that the sexuality in the film is depicted, right? So people found it. So on the one hand, I think kind of queer activists want this idea of a mobile and labile sexuality where, you know, we're all on some kind of spectrum, right? And then actually, as soon as a film represents a spectrum, people take issue with it. Because, you know, it seems to me that the Timothée Chalamet character is, or doesn't know himself until he discovers Oliver, right?
I think his name is pronounced Timothy. Despite the way it's spelled. I've heard him say it. He's just an American guy.
Okay.
Timothée Chalamet. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I think his parents are French and whatever.
Yeah, but it is pronounced Timothy.
Okay. Well, then he shouldn't fucking spell it Timothée.
Well, I don't think he chose that. I don't think he chose that.
So,
but yeah, so you're talking about the sexual spectrum.
Yes, I like that Elio is involved unproblematic with women, that he's shown enjoying it, that he's shown getting immediately hard. and so on, that physically is not a problem for him, that actually the attraction to Elliot, to Oliver is, this kind of absolute falling in love, loss of control, he doesn't understand, he's bewildered. I love all of that, really, because it's not seen as just being a physical thing, right? And then I also like that Oliver gets married at the end, so I kind of, it's a kind of a complex depiction of sexuality. It's not just these men are gay and they behave like this.
Yeah. No, I like that too. I like that. I mean, I suppose it occurred to me, but I hadn't really taken a huge amount of notice of it. But you're absolutely right. Like, it's not a case of, well, you're straight or you're gay, or you're bi. It's like the kid is young and he's kind of discovering who he is.
Yes.
And you don't have to. Sometimes you can just like who you like.
Yes.
And that's sort of what the film is saying. Like, it's not really about whether you're gay or straight. What the father says at the end has an undercurrent of, I accept you for who you are, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
And that is essentially the I don't mind you being gay speech.
Yes.
But nonetheless, it's still not framed as that. It's still kind of it's really more general, and it accepts a kind of more fluid understanding of who people are sexually.
And a more fluid understanding of love as well. Yeah, because I think it's very inclusive. I think kind of every friendship, or every time one falls in love, or every time one is loved, it's a kind of a gift. You can't take it for granted. And so I think that's kind of, what the father's speech is getting at. And I loved it. I agree with it. So the other thing that people take issue with that goes alongside the culture is the way that people move from one language to another, right? Which actually I find realistic. Yeah, that kind of, outside of Britain, kind of, cultured Europeans speak in many languages. Mm-hmm. And, I am someone who grew up for different reasons, kind of, moving from like in between 3 languages and at home, and like 4 and 5 if you count home in the street. So I love the way that language is used, the way that people shift from language to language, the way that language is often used as power. So, that there are some moments where you choose a language to speak in that means something, right?
Particularly, I think, when Elio kind of breaks up with the girl.
That's right.
He's speaking in English there.
That's right.
He's speaking in French the whole time, and that's quite deliberate.
Exactly.
There's a distance that creates between them.
Yes. So I love that. The other thing that people have taken issue with is that the film is set in 1983, and there's no mention of AIDS. And I was looking very closely at the film, and it's true that there is no mention, and I think, I could excuse why there is no mention. It is a small town in northern Italy, and, it was just beginning to hit the news in a big way, really, but, I understand that. But the other thing that I did notice, however, is that, in his bedroom, he's got, oh my God, what's his name? The photographer, Mapplethorpe. He's got a Mapplethorpe poster of, I think the exhibit that was at MoMA that year, which I went to. And, those Mapplethorpe images, like, kind of, they're full of, whips up people's asses and things like that. And, of course, famously, kind of, by the end of that decade, Mapplethorpe himself would die of AIDS. So I think there's a kind of a foreshadowing. I mean, certainly I saw the film, but maybe, I'm just the one who's bringing it to the film. Though, kind of, I think for me the Mapplethorpe poster was a spark. You feel, here's this wonderful adolescent, and he's falling in love the way only adolescents can, like so freely and kind of so emotionally and out of control and so on, and you think, what'll happen to him in the next 10 years, when kind of, the disease really, the pandemic affected everyone I know. Like, we all had so many friends die, and it was like, and you kind of think, here's this young kid, who's just like full of life and joy and pain and so on. And then kind of what's going to become of him was, something that that was on my mind, really. Those are basically kind of the issues that people have taken with the film.
I mean, I kind of like thinking about it. I kind of like that there is no mention of AIDS, because I think if the film mentions AIDS, then I think it kind of becomes all about that.
Yes.
And the fact that it's not, and it allows the film to essentially kind of, in its entirety, be about different things. Be about, I mean, if it were about AIDS, then you imagine it would be about kind of love despite AIDS and that kind of thing. But it's not, right? It's about just being who you are, without this kind of this mortal spectre looming over it.
Yes.
It allows it to be kind of freer.
The thing that I disliked more, or that not that I disliked, but I thought was not as well realized as when I first saw it, and was actually, so a lot of the film strives for a kind of sensuality, right? Like the swimming on the ponds and...
Every time they go near a body of water, they take their clothes off. And it's annoying.
Well, I didn't think that was as well realized as I had first kind of thought, actually.
It's reckless as well. Dangerous.
Why so?
It's dangerous, isn't it? You don't know what's in there.
Oh.
They walk everywhere barefoot. They ride bikes with no hands. They go swimming every time they see a puddle. I was not into that.
Well,
but again, this is about how I spent my teenage years.
In some bus stop, drinking cider. So, so is it like a great work of art? No. I don't think it is, actually. I still think it's like a singular work. I can't remember, a gay adolescent coming of age in which kind of, a character comes into his sexuality in this way. He's really overpowered by feeling, really. And I thought that was wonderful. And Timothée Chalamet is wonderful at depicting that. He's really like...
He is great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's completely... What's the word? He lets himself go, right? So even his embraces and the way he tilts his head and, he's overcome by this passion and you see it, right? Whereas kind of Armie Hammer is a bit of a statue throughout, really.
More than he's intended to be.
Yeah, more than he's intended to be. So...
How would you rate it alongside Moonlight or Carol?
I think it's an inferior film to both. I think Carol's a masterpiece, really. I have problems with Moonlight, though I think it's also like... I mean, I think what it does formally and so on is so much greater than this film. And yet, kind of, I suppose it's kind of what we all bring to it. I think I was more moved by this film, than either of the two others. You know? So
I never finished watching Carol.
Ah.
It was not my cup of tea, and I found it very boring. And I know that that's heresy. It's the film of the year. I wasn't getting it. And Moonlight, I really enjoyed up until the last third of it.
Yes.
Not for the same reasons that you did. You had much better reasons for not liking the last third than I did. I just found the last third quite dull, really.
Yes.
But the first and second sections of the film, I think, are brilliant.
Yes. People are comparing this film to God's Own Country, which is marvelous. And it's a film set in the north of England about, I think in Yorkshire, about a small holding farmer, and trying to keep the farm going, and the son is gay, and he kind of hates himself, really, and he's got he picks up men and has this kind of angry, brutal sex and so on. And then a Romanian farmhand comes to work over the summer or the season or whatever, and they fall in love, and it's really earthy and sensual and quite wonderful, actually. But I think it's a mistake to compare both films. Both films have come out at the same time. And I think one of the interesting things about this moment that we're living in is that there's a lot of like great or interesting, let's say interesting instead of great, but like kind of, fully realized films of various kinds, right? So 120 Beats Per Minute, which I have still to see, and Beach Rats, which I've seen, and God's Own Country, and there's a kind of, and I think it's kind of something to celebrate rather than to posit one film against the other. I think kind of, part of the good thing about living in the present moment is that there are all of these different representations that actually kind of, engage with the world in different ways and from different perspectives. And I find this tendency to kind of only like that which reflects you in some way rather troublesome.
Sorry I asked. Well, you asked me how Jumanji stood up next to the old Jumanji, so I felt like I had the right to. I'm
glad you asked, but you're the one who's regretting it.
You give me a whole thing about how it's wrong to even ask the question, but I suppose you're right. I mean, it's like how cartoons on TV always get sort of put against each other in a way that no other TV show really does. So like The Simpsons and South Park and Family Guy and Futurama and all these shows, they all get compared to each other and in a slightly disproportionate way. And I suppose it's like that with kind of certain types of cinema. So when I'm saying, how does this stack up against other gay films, basically, I can see the problem with asking that. Nonetheless, I didn't think it was a terrible question. I think it's.
Well, I didn't think it was a terrible question. I'm glad you asked it. But let me ask you something, because the other famous scene in the film is obviously the peach scene.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was famous. I mean, I didn't know it was coming.
Right. Well, I didn't tell you. But kind of.
Well, it reminded me of American Pie, frankly.
Yes.
I thought this should be played for laughs. Which I suppose it's funny, but I mean, first thing I thought was he's ruining this peach. And that was even before he put it in his pants. He was the way he was opening it all over the bed.
Yes,
destroyed the thing. And I said it was like the egg earlier. They open up this egg. In fact, I think it's Oliver's character rather than Elio. Oliver opens up this boiled egg and like gets shell everywhere. These people don't know how to eat, right? But I don't know. Like I guess it's something that you might do when you're 17. Fuck a peach.
Well, I think it's striving for a kind of sensuality, right? The ripe peach, the juice dripping all over his chest. Him overcome by a desire for Oliver and a frustration that he's not there. I don't think it's very successfully realized either.
No. I wasn't keen. I mean, to be fair, I think the point where Oliver comes in and eats it is where the film lost me.
Oh, well, again, I think that could have been filmed better, really. But I like the concept more than the execution. And it certainly ties in with the theme. Call me by your name. I am you, you are me.
What's it got to do with the peach?
Well, he's eating the cum off the peach.
Yeah. Okay. You say so. I can't do this now.
Okay.
I spent a long time. It reminded me of holidays that I went on. Kind of package holidays to European countries, mainly the Balearic Islands is where we went to a few times. And I was reminded of these holidays that I took where, if I'm honest, thinking back on them, I had a fucking shit time because I was sort of growing up. I was like 14 when we went to Ibiza, and I ended up hanging out with these kids who were probably all around my age and a little bit older. And thinking back on it, it should have been great. But at the time, I was like, I don't know what's going on here, and I left. And it's like a fucking moron. And because what a great time I could have had. What was I thinking? And what the father says at the end about you only get one heart, you only get one body, and you better use them. I was like, well, I fucking wasted it, haven't I? So thanks.
I wanted to ask you something.
Thanks very much. It just reminded me of what a terrible, terrible teenager I was.
What is Hanukkah meant to celebrate?
Hanukkah's the festival of lights in Judaism, which is, there was some temple, Solomon or Saul or someone, and it was ransacked because the Jews were always getting attacked throughout history and just about surviving. And this temple got knocked down, and there was I'm struggling here, but it was along the lines of there was a menorah or flame that was meant to be a light all the time, and this is the thing, right? So they destroyed this place, and the flame went out, and then they found that there was enough oil. There was only enough oil for the flame to last for 3 days. Yeah. But amazingly, a miracle of God happened, and the flame actually lasted for 8 days.
Right.
So that's it. We have an entire festival that is based on good value. That's Jews.
No, come on.
That's what it is.
When people celebrate Hanukkah, what are they actually celebrating? Because I think it's significant that the last scene is set, during Hanukkah, and that kind of they're having the celebration, and so actually the fact that Oliver makes this phone call at this time, I think is significant, and I just don't know what the significance
I'm going to have to look it up.
All right, well, look it up.
Hanukkah is a Jewish holiday commemorating the rededication of the Holy Temple, the Second Temple, in Jerusalem at the time of the Maccabean Revolt. Festival of Lights, Feast of Dedication. Significance. The Maccabees successfully rebelled against Antiochus IV. According to the Talmud, the temple was purified and the wicks of the menorah miraculously burned for 8 days, even though there was only enough sacred oil for 1 day's lighting.
Right. The Jewishness of the characters in the film is something that is highlighted over and over and over again. Right, so they're the only Jews in this town. The mother says that they're discreet Jews. That's why he removed his Star of David necklace. He puts it back on when he falls in love, right? And kind of then the last scene where, he's told that the love of his life so far is marrying a woman is said during the time of Hanukkah. That has to be significant.
Well, this is the thing. It's kind of a minor holiday, really, but it's been made more significant. I think because of its proximity to Christmas,
right,
and the kind of wish to be able to celebrate an alternative around that period.
Right.
Hanukkah tends to be a bit earlier. Apparently, there's a kind of militaristic. I mean, this was never in it when I was a kid, or something that was really taught to us when I was a kid. But apparently, there's a kind of militaristic theme to it, which is generally downplayed, but it's about the kind of military. Victory of some description, or sort of.
So it's a celebration of like survival or resistance, or
major Jewish holidays are those when all forms of work are forbidden and that feature traditional holiday meals. Blah blah blah. Only biblical holidays fit these criteria, and Hanukkah was instituted some 2 centuries after the Hebrew Bible was completed. Nevertheless, though Hanukkah is of rabbinic origin, it was traditionally celebrated in a major and very public way.
Again, but what does it celebrate? It can't just be that 8 candles remain lit.
I think that is more or less it. I mean, you'd be surprised what Jews can make out of nothing.
So if it was expected to burn after 3 days and it lasted 8 years, then isn't that
8 days,
8 days? Yeah. Sorry, isn't that a symbol of survival and continuance?
Yeah, and God's kind of providing for you and being there.
So I think
that's generally like a kind of major theme of just being Jewish in the world, is that people have constantly tried to take you down and God's on your side.
Right.
And I think this is a small version of that, really.
Okay.
And it's also a kind of way of being able to just kind of publicly show your Judaism, I guess, like your Jewishness. Like there isn't a huge amount that Jews do in that respect, but kind of the once a year having your menorah, you often put it by the window, that sort of thing. I think is maybe that's got something to do with it.
Okay, so it's kind of like a bringing together of the.
But honestly, I mean, you're asking me, which is like most Jews are like me, I think, which is that they're just really not very Jewish.
No,
but I think.
Well, anyway, I just wanted to find the connection because it seems to me that there is one, and I just don't get it. Because but I think you've explained enough so that I have at least a theory about it.
What's your theory?
Well, my theory is that if Hanukkah is a celebration of survival and resistance and continuance, then that's what you get in the context of Elio crying over a lost love, that kind of, things go on and it will continue, and it's not the end of the world, even though it hurts very much,
Seems weak.
Yeah, you don't have a romantic bone in your body.
Well, this is
for such a schmaltz.
This is always the thing, as I've said before with things like this. Like, this is a film which has really moved people, and it made me angry. Whereas, the Toy Story 3, I cry at the end. Terminator
Coco.
2, I cry then. Coco, I cried my eyes out, and I would have more if you hadn't been there ruining it. So how is it that I can identify with
cartoon
skeletons and not human people who, I think what it's really saying is actually quite simple. It's that it's a summer love that the two of them have been through, and it was kind of a brief, passionate thing, and that's the kind of one day, and that crying and that long take of that mourning is the 8 days. You know, the kind of the love is going to live on for a lot longer than the brief passion.
I think that's definitely there.
Yeah.
You know, but I just wonder if there's not all other kinds of tragedies built in. I mean, I had this discussion with a friend, you know, where I was saying, oh, you know, in poor Elio, and like, you know, in 2 years, AIDS will really hit, and what will happen to him afterwards. And my friend was saying, oh, none of that is in the film. You're just kind of bringing your own experience to bear. Yeah. The film is crap. You know, he's saying, no, you know, I think the film has all this. So, you know, kind of, I'm not sure what is in the film and kind of what is just resonating with me.
There certainly seems to be a kind of broad parallel between the kind of Jewish experience and gay experience, in the very broadest sense of being kind of an outsider and being and a kind of small group that is to, you know, some degree marginalised and needing to form kind of tight bonds, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
In the very broadest sense, and that's not just from the end of the film. I mean, they are Jewish the whole way through, and they are gay or kind of exploring their sexuality all the way through as well. It's funny. It's funny that you mentioned your friend saying that it's crap because AIDS isn't in it, and or what's going to happen in 2 years' time when AIDS hits. Because I think one of the things that is so beautiful about the film is that it is a fantasy. You know, one of the things that I didn't like about it that I said was kind of that everyone was having such a good time and they were just enjoying themselves so much, and why wasn't there any tragedy in their lives? But of course you think, well, actually
there was enough tragedy. Fuck you.
Well, every time, kind of in gay cinema, AIDS is kind of unavoidable. It's always there, and it's kind of structuring in so many gay films about gay experience. And so to have one which deliberately avoids it and says we're going to posit a really beautiful gay existence that doesn't have anything to do with that, and is about an exploration of love and self-discovery that doesn't need to involve AIDS, we're setting quite deliberately before that, you know, and offers that speech at the end where the father is so open, progressive.
Yeah, so this kind of, you know, a utopian view, you know.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, I think so too.
And why shouldn't there be one film that is able to do that?
Yeah. No, I agree.
To offer that.
I agree, and it's been the source of many kind of discussions and fights, really.
Yeah.
You know,
Timothée Chalamet is unbelievably good in this.
Yes.
And I believed in his character throughout, even when he was doing stupid things or things that I didn't quite like, actions that I didn't really believe in. I believed in him.
Yes.
And kind of what he was feeling. I didn't fully believe Armie Hammer's character.
I agree. And it's a major fault in the film, actually, looking back on it again.
He seems to be... He comes across as a symbol for Elio to respond to, as opposed to someone who's actually having a relationship with him. I think.
Yes.
It's not even-handed.
I think you're right. And actually, the visuals of the film bothered me. So, you know, I think kind of Guadagnino is so great at capturing Chalamet's every mood, you know. I love the way that you see his eyes and the shifts in his eyes. But actually, every time he goes onto the bloody scenery or whatever, it seems either obvious or, you know, that he's underlining too much, or just kind of... So, for example, there's all these shifts in focus. Yeah, there's two characters in a frame, and, you know, there's a shift in focus from one to the other. And it just kind of seems slack, right? Unimaginative, slack, and badly timed. So I think there are visual elements in the film, and kind of things that have to do with camera movement and so on, that are not as precise and textured as I would have liked, and you notice them more on second viewing.
Yeah, I think that it's not to decry it for a lack of originality, because it's fine for something not to be that original and just be a good example of something that is, but I think this film is both unoriginal in that aspect and also not really that meaningful. It feels like I have seen things like this before.
Oh, well, you see, to me it feels that I haven't really, and...
Well, the way it shoots nature and the way it
relies on... Oh, no, the way it shoots nature, that's banal, yeah.
Not some of the other stuff, but I think it relies on the performances of its actors more than it does the way it captures them, the way it shoots them.
I think you're right.
Which is not, again, that's not like a huge problem, but it just means there's not a huge feeling of, kind of originality or expressiveness in the way that it's shot. But that's no real problem, really. I just think it's easy to kind of overpraise it, but it's like, but look at the way that he shot nature. Oh, it's amazing. It's like, well, actually, if you're honest, it's not. Right?
No, it's true. But anyway, it moved me just as much. I was kind of, I was just as moved the second time around as I was the first. And that to me is to the film's credit.
Yeah. Well, that's good of it.
Yeah. You can't say how much it irritated you one more time.
But it's I promise you, it's absolutely my own fault. It's my own fault for being a crap kid. It's slightly my parents' fault for it, because I went to a boys' school and that has something to do with it.
I don't see that, because you're not the only one who's responded in that way. So there are obviously areas of this film that are deeply irritating to some people, and that in itself I find interesting.
I'd say the closest I ever got to this was when I was 10, 11 years old, and I was on holiday in one of the Balearics as usual with my folks, and I made friends with this guy who was about my age, and I can't remember anything about him except that he wore a red t-shirt quite a lot, and we were hanging out and we were chatting and we made friends, and then we kind of became pen pals, and we got each other's addresses and we were writing to each other, and then a couple of months down the line he wrote to me and said, "I've got to be honest with you, I'm a girl." I had no idea.
Well, how observant of you.
She was Welsh, and so her name was something that I didn't know was male or female.
Right.
And she was kind of a sort of
tomboy.
She's like a tomboy. So I didn't really know, and I was like, what the fuck? So,
and you couldn't tell.
Well, I didn't have any idea. We were like 10 years old. I mean,
well,
the differences weren't that obvious at that age.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
And this film just reminded me. I hadn't thought about that in 15 years.
Well, there you go. See?
Yeah, but it's not a happy memory.
All right, let's end it here.
Ruined my own life, didn't I?
I'm going to open the window again. It's too hot. I'm going to open the window and turn down the heat.
I'm sort of surprised to hear there's a backlash, really. But people will be contrary about anything, won't they?
It's almost like the expected thing, And actually, I do think it's just because it's middle-class people, upper middle-class people, who speak all these languages and are interested in culture, and really that bothers so many people.
Yeah.
I myself don't get it. It's so interesting that it's all these middle-class people who actually, went to really good schools and were given piano lessons, who this film bothers more. Whereas, I'm a peasant. Eavesdropping
at the Movies is on Twitter, at Eavesdrop Movies, Facebook. You can
iTunes.
Find us, iTunes importantly. Leave us a review, because then, unless it's a bad review, I suppose. leave us a good review. And all the rest.
Okay.
Cheerio.